So, can anybody hear us? Yeah. Thank you so much. A lot of people attending this. I'm Peter Kofler. I am chairman of the Danish Entrepreneurship Association. We are going to talk about something very big and unknown. We're going to talk about AI, and we're going to talk about how to scale in the EU. You will meet two fantastic companies talking about their journey and their challenges, and you will also meet three fantastic experts that will give feedback on this. So we've been talking a lot about local markets and ecosystems at TechBBQ, but there's also another perspective to this, and that's talking about continents and how we, as a European continent, can compete. We are 500 million inhabitants, quite wealthy, that is. So how do we make Europe a thriving market? And there's a good reason to talk about this, because when we look on all these new interesting technologies, Europe is lacking behind big time. So talking about, so to speak, the clash of continents, Asia and US is way ahead of us. And these are markets with double-digit growth numbers, and we need in Europe, not only financially, but ultimately in order to determine our own destiny, to be able to master and take part in this. Also, it's really relevant to take up this discussion because we do have a new parliament, we do have a new commission, and this is very much their working agenda too. Well, uniquely, we also have a Dane leading this whole thing. So how do we get Europe back? This is our second talk about startups and the EU. In our association, we follow this closely, and we want to feedback what is going on. So, as I said, we'll bring in real startup, real stories, real challenges. We will have Worksome. It's a dear darling of the Danish ecosystem. We'll meet Morten, and we'll have Anna from Solita from Finland. A very interesting country in regards to AI, and a scale-up with almost 1,000 employees. That's something we're looking at in Denmark as well. And then, briefly, our panel. We have the digital master from Dansk Industri, Danish Confederation of Danish Industry, Christian Hannibal. We have Michael Breinholst from Coinify. A slight change in the program. We just found a more knowledgeable person, and then we ruthlessly changed. And last but not least, Jonas from Digital Hub Denmark. So the format is Worksome. Tell a little bit about your company. Tell about the challenges you are facing, scaling, looking at all these new technologies, and get some feedback from the panel. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Hi guys. Can I take a picture first? I need to send a picture home to the team because this is kind of cool. Is that okay? Say hi. Great stuff. Okay, hi, my name is Morten Petersen. I am the CEO and co-founder of Worksome, and I see a bunch of familiar faces here. Actually, there's 3 people in the crowd that worked for Worksome already. We have Tim, Morten, and Peter. That's great. Thank you for coming. How many of you have heard about Worksome before? Some. That's nice. It's not. Next year will be better, I'm sure. But the long story short about Worksome is that we are a marketplace for freelancers, high-end freelancers and consultants. We founded the company in 2017, so 2.5 years ago or so. And we are basically building a platform where freelancers can sign up on one side and companies on the other side, and we match the two. utilizing. So we actually try not to say AI because it sounds just annoying and everybody's talking about AI. So we usually we say we are using advanced algorithms, but it's basically the same, right? I guess. And we started out in Copenhagen. We are 15 people in total. We just expanded into a couple of new European markets. So we have people on the ground in London. One of our co-founders just relocated there a couple of months back, and we're now setting up a team there, trying to build the same stuff as we've been doing here in Denmark. We also have presence in Norway and Lithuania, of all places. So that's it, and looking to sort of scale our business across Europe and globally. Yes. So that's a short story about Worksome. We have 14,000 freelancers signed up on one side, 10,000 people, companies on the other side. We basically try to match the two. And we're launching new features and a bunch of stuff and all that. So that's cool. But what I wanted to talk about today is some of the challenges that we do see for Worksome in a EU perspective, right? Is that on topic? Good.
Very good.
Perfect. So the first thing I would like to cover is, have you sort of seen those discussions on regulating AI to avoid bias? Have you heard about that? Yes, people are nodding. Can I just ask you a question before we go into this topic? How many of you actually have a job? Great work, guys. Try to keep your hands up. So how many of you with an actual job got that job through someone that you kind of knew, network? So basically all of you. That's nice. Most of you. So this is just an important notion to think about when we talk about bias in AI, because one of the things that has been discussed is whether or not AI will sort of create stronger bias in recruitment, sort of stronger than the one we see today. But think about it, if all of you got your job through a network, that is some pretty significant bias right there. Imagine that I can only get your job if I knew the same person that you did. That's quite amazing. So what I want to point out here is that before we start talking about regulating stuff and removing bias from AI, let's just get AI to work and use AI to remove that immense bias that we see out there already today, because it is kind of crazy how much bias that is going into recruitment today, and I think that is an important topic to fix, but I'm pretty sure that AI is our friend here and not our enemy, if you get my point on that. So our algorithms have no idea whether or not you are male or female. They don't know. They have no idea if what color of your skin and stuff like that. Stuff that is pretty evident that actually plays a large role in normal recruitment, right? I just saw an article claiming that, I can't remember the actual number, but I think if you had an Afro-American name and you sent in a resume for basically a cover letter for a job in the US, I think the likelihood of you getting an interview was like decreased and cut in half just by your name. That's kind of crazy. So stuff that we're looking into is trying to do blind recruitment, even sort of giving company the option to remove names from that. So that's one thing that I think we should try not to to regulate too early, because it's not a real problem. Just like when we talk about driverless cars, right? The discussion, which is actually a pretty nice discussion to have, whether or not a driverless car should prioritize one life over another. You had that discussion. It's really nice for a Friday night with some red wine, but it's not super relevant yet, because it's not really an issue, right? It's not so that you have the driverless cars out there just killing black people. I mean, it's not really stuff that's going on, right? So let's not regulate that yet. So that's my one point. The other point in a EU sort of context is that we keep talking about EU as EU was a market. And I guess it is by definition, I actually don't know. But from a startup perspective, we don't really care about EU. I mean, we started out in Denmark, which is fine. And then we move into UK, which may or may not be EU in a second. No one knows. But thing is that it's not really a benefit for us to expand our business into another EU market. It's probably as easy for us to establish ourselves in the US as it is in UK, from a sort of practical point of view, right? Because it's basically, when you go into a new market in EU, if you tried that, it's just a pain in the butt, right? Because nothing of the stuff that you do today, sort of from a practical point of view, translates into the new market. So you need to have a new system for paying people, for doing your bank. You have a new bank account. You need to have a new program for whatever you're doing. So everything is new in the new market. So from a startup perspective, it doesn't feel like we have one market. So, and I think that's important for us to realize. So we are not really competing as EU towards the US. It's still Denmark towards US. So that's two main points I wanted to raise today.
Very good. Two
Thank you.
important points. Don't regulate something you don't know what is.
Don't fix problems before it's actually a problem. Sort of, yeah, that's stupid.
Get it.
Yeah.
And the single digital European market
Would be nice.
is a myth.
It's a myth. It would be nice though. So if we can fix that today, it will be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's give the word to the panel before we bring Anna into the discussion. Christian, can you elaborate a bit on Morten's points?
Well, I agree completely that right now the thought of a digital single market is well, basically a thought. It's not something that's going on as it is. Even though actually the European Commission, the previous European Commission, has been focusing on building bridges around Europe and across borders in the digital field, in the same way that we purchase goods from all over Europe, then we should be able to sell data or transfer data all across Europe and pick each other's talents. The sad thing is that it's not really happening though. You're not building a new branch in Romania, even though it would probably be a lot cheaper than to do it in the UK. You're doing it in the UK because it's easy and you know the English market is attractive. You're not going for the Romanian market. What I would like to ask you though is if AI or machine learning or whatever advanced algorithms is seen as not being unbiased, that they are biased. Yeah. Because that's one of the things that the AI has been criticized for, that they're reproducing the biases of regular people. Could Denmark or EU, could we play a role in negating those prejudices about AI, that AI is prejudiced itself? And could Worksome take a role in that?
Yes.
Yes.
so
all right.
I'm sure we'll get back to this. Okay. Michael, do you want to chip in?
Yep. What I'm thinking about really is you raise a complexity around bias in the AI models, and that you're trying to remove what would typically be the biases. And then the question remains, how do you then regulate that, so to speak? It's not a secret, I share your opinion that the regulation should start soft and move, you could say, move from there when the problems come up. I do think it is possible. You're raising some good points. Of course, the complexity of the issue is, and you can have politicians struggling to find a good answer for that, is which parameters would the politician would want you not to put into your algorithm. And it's going to be extremely complex, because do we all agree that it's sex, skin color, sexual orientation? What is the list that the politicians have to agree on that you take out? And I actually like to pose a question back to you on that, because I'm assuming you have an opinion about why you're removing it. Is that to try to teach the AI not to be biased, or do you think you'll get better results from doing it and therefore a better product?
I'm answering. Yes. Mm-hmm. So the latter, right? So I think the common notion is that removing bias is good, right? Not just because we remove the bias, but because it produces better results. So that's definitely the case. So that's why we are not sticking bias in there. And my point is on the regulating part on that is just that we have ton of bias every day in every hire that we do, and sort of regular hires is still 99.5% of all hires, right? So you should rather regulate that bias, even though that's probably harder, and fix that instead of trying to sort of solve that minor issue we have here, which could eventually be a big one. I realize that, but I think it's easier in the end to adapt AI to not have bias than it is to get us not to have bias, unfortunately. Yeah.
So Jonas, Digital Hub Denmark, we need unicorns in the Nordics. How do we do that with a fragmented European market?
I think I'll talk on both things. So the first, just to address the ethical aspect, because I think that's important for the unicorns as well, is really that much of the discussion today is at a kind of an abstract level, and we talk about biases and so on. But I think the real game changer will be to kind of make it operational, and so that it's not so much about the regulation by public authorities, but developing the tools and guidelines that allow companies and the management of different companies to be reassured that they actually use best practices when they take AI, when they deploy AI in their organizations and so on. So I think that's one really important aspect. About the European single market, of course, I totally agree on the need, and that would be nice. I think we can send that input, of course, to the MEPs. But at the same time, I think as a startup company, what is really important is that you need to not look so much at just how you scale within Europe, but also how you know what is going on in the global centers of tech development. And you have conversations on an ongoing basis with people in London, in Silicon Valley, in New York, and other hubs around the world where all the other startups will go. And by having those conversations and those relationships, you will know what is happening in the rest of the world, which gives you a much better chance of building a business model that will actually be really scalable. So I think that's important for the future unicorns as well.
Very good point. So let's bring Anna into this conversation with new inputs, and we'll continue. Anna just arrived from Helsinki. I think just let's give her a hand for coming. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. So Anna Metsäranta is my name. Peter shied away from trying to pronounce my last name. I don't blame him. Who here has heard about a company called Solita? My lovely colleague over there wrote us. Okay. I figured that would be the case. We don't operate in Denmark. That hopefully explains it. So Solita is digital transformation consultancy. We're driven by data and human insight. Big words, I'll come back to those. Basically, our service offerings range from strategic consulting to service design, digital solutions development, data analytics, and of course AI, which is an area that I work in mostly. And we also do cloud services. So we're kind of like a full service house. We can do the design, we can do the strategy, we can also do the development and the implementation and the maintenance. We were founded in 1996, so we really can't be considered a startup. Maybe not. Well, we're now calling ourselves a scale-up, but maybe a growth company would be more appropriate. Nowadays, we employ about 1,000 people of over 20 nationalities. We operate in 9 different cities across Finland, Sweden, Estonia, and Germany. We have a 100 million euro turnover with market-leading 20% growth rate, and also of international growth of 120%. The customers that we serve the public sector and also the private sector with like a wide range of different industries. We do projects for financial services, for example. We do health tech, retail, transport, process industries, all sorts of stuff really. And the stuff that we do is, like I said, the big words: digital transformation, data, human insight. I need to come back to those because it really defines who we are and what we do. So we do large transformation initiatives. We learned long ago that it's not about technology. Even though we are a digitalization consultancy, it's not about technology. It's always about culture. So these initiatives that we do, they might be technical in nature, but they fundamentally change the culture of the company. And it's this cultural change that enables us to create new business opportunities. So that's why it's important. Data is typically at the heart of what we do. So we might do like data platform implementation, or at the other end of the spectrum, we might do a strategic initiative to help our customers become data-driven. The human insight is a really interesting element to me, and it is often in discussion when we talk about AI. But human insight for us means that we understand people, and in all of our initiatives, we aim to understand the users, the customers, the people that the solutions that we build will impact one way or another. So by understanding people, I mean that we try to get to the bottom of the deepest hidden motivations and drivers. Why do people behave the way they do? And through this combination of technical skills, ability to deliver solutions, but crucially ability to deliver solutions that users will adopt and love, that's the core. That's how we create long-term value. What else?
So
I think
looking at challenges and AI, how is that in your perception?
So AI, perhaps I'll just say a few words about what I do, because it explains why I'm here today talking about the challenges and barriers with regards to AI. So my role specifically is to help companies become more data-driven, to utilize their data, to see the value, the strategic value in their data, and to use advanced analytics or algorithms or whatever you want to call it to harvest these new business opportunities. And what I kind of see on a daily basis is really crucial lack of understanding. What is AI? It's not magic, right? It's not a magic wand. It's nothing sort of mythical and weird. It's math and statistics and stochastic optimization. And the kind of the challenge that we face, we're trying to help companies get started with their AI journey, start utilizing this fantastic technology that has the power to transform businesses. But because the sort of starting level of discussion is really low and full of hype and full of inflated expectations, it always takes a while to get to the point of what can we actually realistically do with AI. It doesn't perform miracles. So there's two sides to this, and I just really generally find that the general population does not know enough about AI, and perhaps it's too early for that anyway. I realize that I don't expect everybody to know about AI, but my view of the future is that although, let's point it out here, AI is just a tool, it's not a value in its own right, it's just a tool, but it's a powerful tool, and as such I think it's going to kind of become ubiquitous, like it is now. You cannot pick up your smartphone without picking up a whole bunch of AI. It's going to become like that in business as well. It's going to be in every industry. It's going to impact everything that we do. So from that perspective, I think it would be important to take some conscious action to start increasing the general level of understanding, the basics, the fundamentals of how does this work. So the two sides of this are that if you don't understand the technology, then you firstly don't understand its possibilities, and this leads to a lack of vision. You can't think, what could I do with this technology? How could it help my business transform? That's one problem. The other problem is that you don't see its limitations. Then you buy into this ridiculous hype, these sensationalist news headlines that typically state one of two things. First thing being, AI can do anything. It can cure cancer. Well, it can't, newsflash. The other aspect is, somebody mentioned this earlier today, AI is a threat to humanity. It'll take all of our jobs and then it'll kill us all off. Well, it's not going to do that either. I'm pretty sure of that. But people who don't understand the technology and who don't understand how machine learning works, how does a machine learn? It doesn't understand. It just does a lot of mathematical operations. And when we start to understand that, and we understand the realistic problems that this technology can solve, then we can let go of the hype. So the two problems really due to this lack of understanding, or the low level of understanding, is the lack of vision. Companies cannot formulate a vision of how can we utilize this technology. Incidentally, a lot of companies nowadays seem to be trying to solve this problem by hiring a lot of data scientists. That's not how it works. You can have data scientists and they're lovely and you should have data scientists, but it's not their job to tell the business what the business should do. That's the business's job. So just like we expect data scientists to understand a little bit about the domain that they work in, we should be able to expect the business to understand a little bit about the technology that they want to deploy. And that's how, when business and technology work together, we're getting somewhere. So that's the lack of vision. The problem with the inflated expectations caused by the hype is that when senior management expects miracles and they expect that they can just pour all of their data into this magical black box called AI and fantastic insight will come out of it, they don't see the potential of the realistic use cases, which might be quite modest. And they should be modest to get started with the technology, to start growing your maturity and your understanding. So that leads to lack of funding. We can't get companies to fund these initiatives.
Okay.
And the one more thing, you pointed it out earlier, this disparity between the level of knowledge in the US and in China. Out of the big 9 AI companies, 6 are in the US, 3 are in China. What about Europe? How do we bridge that gap? So my question to the panel is, what can we do on a European level to encourage companies to start building up their maturity and to start experimenting with the technology so we can learn?
Very good. Christian?
Well, since you're from Finland, I would like to congratulate Finland on the Finnish initiative Elements of AI.
Thank you. It's fantastic.
How many of you have heard of Elements of AI? Very few. Well, it's a fantastic initiative started by Helsinki University with the aim of teaching, I think, 1% of the Finnish population in basic AI.
Yep.
It's a 6-week course, at least it was when I started it.
It can be done in 3 evenings from the couch.
Probably. It took me 6 weeks. But which gives the average person a good but basic knowledge of AI. Yep. And I think that is actually quite an impressive feat now. I think it's 5% of the Finnish population that's taken this course. And the great thing is that it's teachers and nurses and accountants and political lobbyists and lawyers and whatnot who's taken this course. And suddenly they have just a basic understanding. What is AI? What is machine learning? What's the difference, if there is a difference? And how they should use this. So I would very much like to see this initiative rolled out on a European scale. Because if there's something that would be that Europe could do that the US and China hasn't done, is to democratize AI or the knowledge of AI. So we're going beyond the hype and actually give people a lot more people a basic insight in what technology can do and do it in their trucking companies and sawmills and hospitals and whatnot.
Do you recognize, Christian, this lack of knowledge also on a political level? Should the European Parliament take the elements of AI as well?
For sure, and the same thing goes for the media. I participated in a news in a TV news broadcast when they about AI once. And when I was talking, they have some footage from Terminator 2 showing. And then the follow-up question from the journalist was, why do you think politicians have such a vague idea about AI? And I said, well, for starters, if you stopped showing footage from Terminator 2 when you're trying to explain what AI is, then that would be very helpful.
Very good. Yeah.
Very good.
So, Michael, will you try to answer Anna's question?
Absolutely. Let me try to take a different perspective, because you could say there's definitely a pan-European plan of attack that we need to engage with. But I would actually, since we are at TechBBQ today, there's a lot of startups, there's a lot of scale-ups, a lot of companies. I would actually like to turn it around and say, what can I do? What can you do? About a year ago, we first introduced the concept of AI in Coinify. And I would say I saw a lot of people with kind of pale white faces when I started explaining why that would be super cool to use as a fraud detection mechanism. And today we have implemented AI in full, and we've even done training courses among the staff. And I would say today there are no pale faces. There's a lot of proud people that I guarantee would be able to go home and explain their spouses or families that, this AI is not that dangerous. It's actually quite cool. And today, the technology, remember, just over the last 10 years have evolved massively, especially in the software area. Because today, when you do a startup, I've done a couple of startups back from 15 years ago until recently, and it's extremely easy to plug into technologies today. So why not plug into AI-based technologies and let that enhance your company? It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be difficult. And I guarantee you that a while after, you're going to have a better company and a lot of happy employees. So I suggest we start on our own. We should also do the European initiative. But yeah.
Very good and relevant. Jonas?
I prefer the last focus as well. Basically, what can the companies do? And I think the main thing, it's a little bit of what you're talking about as well. So it's basically, one thing is the leadership's mindset, so the digital imagination, that they can imagine the kind of business model that they can do with these new technologies, and they need to understand a little bit about the technologies to do that. The other thing is to build the execution power within the organization. And to do that, you need to start experimenting with it now. And you need to collect your own data for your own purposes and find out how can you apply AI on top of that. So I think that's important, and it just becomes more and more important, and competition becomes more and more about collecting data and using that as a way to predict the future and then deliver solutions to your customers on that basis. So I think it's really about starting for the companies to think about that, and maybe more, rather than think about themselves as a company within a specific industry, and think about themselves as a data company with a front end in a specific industry. And if that's the case, what kind of data should they then collect? Then at the EU level, of course, then the EU that can do things as well, like build centers of excellence and come up with regulation and build AI principles and things like that. But that often, or that quickly becomes a kind of high level where I think it's very important to, again, kind of make it into something tangible that people here can act on as well. But it's still important for you to send off the messages to the EU level, of course. But yeah.
So let's get back to what we touched upon to start with. Trust as a Nordic or even European value. How do we embed this in our AI efforts? And that is also really something that Margrethe Vestager needs to figure out. So do we need like some kind of best practice tools that can guide us? Do we need a GDPR on steroids? So when you start with AI, you need to comply with a lot of things.
Please no.
How do we set the handles right? Because in 5 years, we should be looking at a thriving AI industry in Europe.
I'll be happy to start out on that one. I actually want to take Anna's inspiration about basically there's two types of people when you're talking about AI. One is the ones that believe we can cure cancer, and the other one is afraid that the Terminator 2 is going to walk into your kitchen one day. We've got to realize you could say the perspectives here. Let's say Anna is right, and I definitely believe you're right. If Anna is right, there's nothing to be afraid of. Except the fact that the US and China are going to beat us commercially, but that's a different story here. But my point is, on the regulation side, if there are no Terminator 2, and there are no, you could say, extreme hype of curing cancer, then regulation is going to be fairly simple, because you actually don't need to do a lot. And I mean, that would, for me at least, be a great starting point. You have to realize that Anna is right. And you have to make sure that the politicians have not seen too much Terminator 2. Because if they have, they will over-regulate massively.
Just I can see our super moderator here is trying to turn us off. So let's have like very quick comments on this regulation, no regulation. Anna?
So regulation is still necessary for the ethical aspects, and for a reason I didn't bring out that topic because that's a hugely complex and difficult topic. We participate in that discussion, for example, through the Finnish Center for AI. It's a highly complex topic. European Parliament has tried to address it, but it's not so easy. But as for this Terminator 2 thing, I'd really kind of like to kill that vision, and I think there's some conscious effort that we can do to train people, but still, like we talked here, you guys talked about companies starting to do stuff with AI. Yes, they need to do that, but how do we encourage European companies to take it up a notch? There's too many companies now sitting still.
Morten, I will not ask you regulation, no regulation. I think you're pretty clear on that. Christian?
Thank you.
Well, I think that most companies are better at finding ways to compete than at being regulated. So if we as consumers seek solutions that are responsible and ethical, and that we know which are and which aren't, then I think that would be a huge competitive advantage for many companies. So if your companies are able to market yourselves as being more digitally responsible than, say, the average digital company out there, then I think that would be a huge benefit. But that's not about regulation, that's about making standards which are, of course, above GDPR.
Yeah. You touched upon standards and tools too, Jonas. Anything more to add?
Yeah, just I think as well that maybe not regulation, but the European values can be a competitive advantage, and it doesn't need to be in hard kind of government regulation, but the self-regulation and the industry's regulation can be valuable as well. So if we can embed that can be that might also be a faster way to implement some of these things in our daily lives. Yeah, so I think it's both and then it's about making it operational and practical.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to get kicked off stage. Everyone here promised to stay, so please keep the conversation going. If you have anything to add or you want to join us to our journey to Brussels, please get in touch. Thank you so much, everyone.